Hi, Colleen. I'm so excited to dive into your story and talk more about what you're doing now. Do you mind just letting listeners know just a little bit about yourself and where you are today?
Sure. So a little bit about myself. I'm Colleen Flowers. Right now I am at my home in Denver, Colorado, and my husband and I will be moving to Berlin, Germany within a year.
Wow, that's so
Yeah.
exciting.
So at other points I will be in a different physical location.
Yeah,
I'm doing great. I had a great night's sleep, a great breakfast. So yeah.
awesome. Yeah, you seem super happy today, and I don't know if it's the lighting in the room, but you are just radiating today, so it's good.
Yeah.
Can I ask, what's in Berlin? Berlin. What are you moving there for?
Sure. So the first reason we're moving there is because my husband and I fell in love with the culture when we visited there last year. And it has a lot to do with my treatment after a breast cancer diagnosis. And so, but first, we love the culture. Second, I'll be able to get more of the treatments that I like there. And then third, we're just up for an adventure and want to live in Europe and not necessarily the US.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that's so exciting. That's a big move. I'm excited for you.
Yeah.
Can we talk? I know you mentioned about your breast cancer. Can we talk? When was it when you were first diagnosed, actually?
Sure. So before I answer that question, what I heard you just say was your breast cancer. And I'm very, very careful with words. And
Okay.
so I know for some people it is their cancer. Like they know they developed it. It's a reason that it's there. But for me, within the first hour, I said and felt, this is not mine.
Mhm.
And so the words I used were, I was given a diagnosis of cancer. Not even I received it, but I was given it. So I refer to it as like the diagnosis or
Mhm.
things like that. It's not because like I'm in denial or rejecting it,
Mhm.
but it's just not something that I am taking on because I feel like it's so much from the environment outside
Mhm.
and then the environment inside with like my mental and heart things.
Okay.
Okay. So what was the question?
No, I totally agree. I worked in Paralympic sports, and we always used to say a person with a disability instead of a disabled person because it doesn't define them,
Exactly.
right? It's just
Mhm.
something to them, right? So I actually was going to say like you were a breast cancer survivor, but I didn't know exactly where you were, so then I cut myself off. So thank you for expanding on that teaching point.
Right, I know. And like words can get like crazy. And so I don't use survivor because that goes with the war imagery. Like you
Yes.
fight cancer, you survive it. And so for me, it's more thriving, just living my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. You have, yeah, you have so much, I feel like, to dive into. Can you kind of, before we dive into kind of, I guess, the language and all of that, because so much is there. Can you just let us know, like, where it was where you were all, where you were when it all started?
With the diagnosis?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right now it's October 2016, and I was given the diagnosis June 1st, 2015. So
Okay.
a little over a year ago. And my story is that pretty much my entire life I have experienced illnesses. So as a child, I always had stomach aches and belly aches. I was tired all the time, tired. When I was 16, I had a really bad case of mono, which is Epstein-Barr virus. And I know that has been linked to an increased risk of developing cancer. And I knew that for a long time. And then in my 20s, I moved to Colorado and I felt amazingly better. And I think a lot of it had to do with allergies. And then in my early 30s, around 2011, I started just feeling sick all of the time. And what that meant for me was I would get a low grade fever throughout the day, but I didn't have it in the morning or at night.
Hmm.
My body would ache, my legs would ache. I would be so tired. And the place that I worked at the time was very holistic. And so at lunch, I would sleep, and that was fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then it took over a year for the doctors here in Denver to figure out that it was Q fever, which is a rare bacterial infection.
Hmm.
And so they treated me with 14 weeks of 2 different antibiotics that did nothing. And then eventually I found a healer that he said in 10 days you'll feel better. And I did. And
Wow.
so about 3 months later is when I started telling people, like, I think I'm better, because I had been sick for 2 years and resigned to this is how my life is going to be.
Hmm.
So I was like, yay, I'm all better.
Hmm.
And I've always eaten healthy and taken care of my body and reduced stress. So what Q Fever taught me was really good self-care. So now I say no, I take naps, I put myself first. So I thought everything was great and wonderful. And I've always had very dense breasts, lumpy, bumpy. And 9 years ago, I had a lumpectomy because a benign tumor had gotten very big. But they're always like, you're not at risk for breast cancer. Don't worry about it. And then 2 summers ago, I said to my doctor, should we do some sort of scan on my breasts? It's been a while. And she's like, no. If we go looking for something, we're going to find something. You're young, you're healthy. No, because at that time I was 34. So then 6 months later, I found a lump because I have lots of them. And I was like, whatever. It's just like the rest. It moves. It's no big deal. And 3 months later, it was still there. So I was like, let's go get an ultrasound. And the ultrasonographer was like, let's do a mammogram. And so we did the mammogram, and that was negative. And then she sent me for a biopsy, and that's when it came back as positive for a very aggressive cancer. And so that's when I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. Oh, you froze. Oh no. I'm hoping, sorry, you froze. I don't know if you can see me or hear me. This doesn't normally happen. Okay. Sorry, I don't know what happened there.
I know.
I know.
You froze, and I was like, I should stop talking.
Yeah. I don't know how far you got into that. Yeah. You were just in the middle of saying, oh my God, after the diagnosis.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, then it was like for real. And I had done all of these things for about 10 years to do good breast health, which is not wearing underwire bras, not using antiperspirant with aluminum. And I know a lot of this is controversial and not proven, but I was doing that. I was loving myself. And so it just seemed like it came out of nowhere.
That must have been hard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think it's hard for anybody for a doctor to be like, so this is cancer.
Yeah.
Because what you actually hear is, so you're going to die.
Yeah. Wow. And
sure.
Yeah. And you were 34 at that time, or was this later?
I just turned 35.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And I mean, not that, because of course you were so aware of everything in terms of health and everything. What was that like after you were diagnosed?
Right. So I'm a holistic reproductive health practitioner, and I teach fertility awareness, which is a secular version of natural family planning. So for years, I've been teaching my clients like healthy lifestyle things to avoid cancer and increase their chances of a good, healthy life. So I felt like I was lying, like I was doing all of it and cancer still came. And so I was like, you can't do anything to prevent it. It's pointless. It's like, no, I think so I was like, I'm not going to teach anymore because if it didn't work for me, it's not going to work for anybody else. And by work, I don't know what that means per se. But so it was really hard to be like, is the holistic natural way any good from the conventional way or not? And so I had to come to terms. And then after 6 months, I was like, no, I'm going to keep doing this because I love it.
Yeah, that would be really hard because I feel like that was your identity, right? Before the diagnosis, it was helping with women through that. And then, yeah, getting that would have been really hard. When you when you got the diagnosis, how did you, then what was the next step for you? What did you do?
I got lots of second opinions. Okay. So I had 2 appointments with surgeons, 2 appointments with oncologists, 2 appointments with plastic surgeons, lots of second opinions. I enlisted my sister, who is really smart with science. So she read all of the books, all of the studies, all of the things like that. And then I enlisted other people in my life to do things that anybody could do, like cooking and cleaning, because there was only certain things I could do. I was the only one who could go get the PET scan.
Yeah.
I was the only one who could go do the infrared sauna. I was the only one who could drink the green juices and smoothies I was making. And so I asked, because people, I think in most lives, community come around and support. And so I was very good at saying, great, you can do this, you can do that, and not feeling bad or hesitant, because if the roles had been switched, of course, I would want to go food shopping for a good friend. So I think that was the first thing I did, was just like get my people around me. And there's a great article, I think it's called The Circles Theory, where it talks about, so whatever big thing that has just happened, whether it's a diagnosis or a divorce or a car accident, there's one person in the middle. And then the first circle around them is their partner or their closest person. And then the next circle is their family, friends, and so on. And so the rule of the circle theory is that love can only come in, and then anything negative goes out. So because I was in the center of the circle, I could dump on any ring outside of the circle.
Yeah.
And anything that would come into me would be love. So this was just a very strong boundary that my friends and family could understand very quickly without like their feelings getting hurt. But then it also protected my husband, who is the first circle. So no one could come to him. Like, let's say my sister couldn't come to him and say like, I'm so upset, Colleen's been given this diagnosis, blah, blah, blah. No, she has to go to her circle or somewhere else. So like her friends, our other family members. So the only person during this whole time that Josh, my husband, was receiving anything negative from was me.
Wow.
So like parents, friends were only sending in positive. And so I think that was the very first thing I did. And then of course the second thing was all the vast research of what I'm going to do, because I had always said, oh, if cancer happens in my life, I'll just go to Mexico. And I thought that would be like maybe in my 50s or 60s or 70s, not when I was 35. So I was like, okay, are you going to Mexico?
Yeah.
And what was hard about that was the doctors here that I talked to and worked with said, this cancer is so fast and so aggressive, you don't have time for natural alternative stuff, because natural alternative stuff takes time. And I agree with that. That's what I teach my clients. Like, if you have allergies, yes, taking the Benadryl or the Zyrtec or the Claritin, like boom. Taking nettle tea and all these other herbs, those work over time. And so I was like, oh no, do I not have time for alternative and things like that? But as I started talking to and researching with practitioners who use alternative medicine, they said, yes, I have time.
Okay. How did you come to terms with understanding, quote unquote, why this happened to you, or how you, or whether you have it all? I don't know. Right. That's my question. I mean, that what I would think of in your situation is, it's not that it's not fair. It's just, you were doing all the right things. Right.
Yeah. It was totally unfair.
Right? And that's what I'm like, that isn't fair for you, Colleen.
Right. So why did this happen? So at first it was just like, because our environment stinks. People are so used to like, oh, everything causes cancer. Yeah. And we've done that. Like, and so to just say like, it's what I've been bathed in for 35 years. I grew up on the East Coast near Philadelphia, and I've heard a lot of people refer to the area between Washington, D.C. to Boston, including New York and Philly, as the cancer belt, because there's so many toxins and things like that. So I don't know if that was it. So at first, at the beginning, it was easy just to say it's the environment, like that's all it is. I'll do my best to make the space around me safer. But then, of course, as it's progressed over the last year or so, when I went to the clinic in Germany a few months after I was given the diagnosis, so I was diagnosed June 1st, and I arrived in Germany in the middle of August, they always talk about why cancer, why, what's the reason. They don't just say like, oh, it happens. They say like, there's an emotional reason. And they taught me that there's a difference between left breast cancer and right breast cancer. And so for left breast cancer, they say, and this is not always true, take it with a grain of salt.
Yes.
But oftentimes it has to do with a woman feeling like she doesn't have any power. She finds herself to be more of a victim in her life, and other people in her life have the power. Whereas right breast cancer, which is what I was given the diagnosis of, has more to do with like control and power, and you're in charge. And I was like, oh, how did you know that about me? You just told me 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. Wow.
So we talked a lot about how to let go of that control and that worry, because I had been like a worst case scenario thinker all the time, which I thought was great. Like I was on top of things. Yes, prepared. Like these were good things in our society. I could multitask. I could think fast. Like I was efficient. And realizing that that was creating the acidic environment in my body. So walking away from that experience, saying like every day I have to meditate. Just like I eat 3 times a day, I also have to meditate. Like that's not like, oh, if I have time. Because why did the cancer develop in my internal environment? Because of the negativity. And so it started with my mind when I was in Germany. And then when I got home, the journey moved more toward my heart, because the therapist in Germany had said to me when I said like, but I take great self-care do great self-care, like with Q fever, like that's what I learned. And she said, yes, but self-care is not self-love. And that's when I started crying, because I was like, right, I hate myself. And where that came from for me was the spiritual upbringing I was brought up in, teaching that the heart is bad. And that comes oftentimes, if we trace it back to St. Augustine, with original sin. So every person is born with this original sin mark on them. And then finding out theologically, like, oh, there's a whole other world that actually believes in original blessing, wherein our heart is good and we're in the image of the divine and there is no sin. Like it's just like, yes, we do sin because the sin is on the outside by the things we do, the things we say, but it's not on the inside, like in my heart. So I went through all that like deep theological reading and understanding of that, so I could have that background. And I thought I was doing self-love throughout the whole year. But then when I arrived back in Germany this past summer for another round of treatment in June, one of the meditations I do when I walk is I say, I love myself. My heart is good. My soul is good. I love myself. And when I started doing that in the park in Germany, I was like, oh my gosh, like I have not been self-loving myself. I have just gotten to the equilibrium where I've stopped hating myself. And so now I can move into loving myself. And I started calling myself sweetheart and things like that. And when I share this experience with other women here in the US, by and large, the response is like, if I said like, I love Colleen, that would feel so arrogant. Like, who am I to like love myself? And so there's just this really odd culture here of just degrading ourselves as opposed to seeing how beautiful and lovely we really are and things like that. So why was the cancer there? The environment outside my body, and then the negative self-talk and self-hate inside my body. So far, that's the answer. There's probably more.
That is a pretty powerful answer. Not a lot of people can be so critical but yet loving with themselves at the same time. It seems like you've learned so much throughout this year and a bit, right? Yeah. What was it like, Colleen, before? What are the biggest changes between Colleen kind of before diagnosis to now?
I think my husband would be the best one to answer that, because he's the one who lives with me. So before, there was just a lot of like, we're late, we have to do this, like go, 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 here are the facts, like information, la, la, la. And now like, I'm just like, oh, okay. I'd like to get there on time, but okay.
Yeah. How did you?
So that didn't just happen.
Yeah.
That wasn't that was not a conscious thing, because for years I was trying to be more laid back,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't happening. But it's been a slow progression of all of the things that I've been implementing with meditation and with soul work and heart work and all the healers that I've been seeing for different parts of our whole being, not just like the physical cells of my body. Because I said to my naturopath doctor when I came back from Germany, because he's like, I want you to do all these things, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, great. Number one on the list is my mind and my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And then number two is the physical cells of my body. So if doing all 30 of these things is going to stress out my mind and my heart, we have to tease out what's most important, because I have to stay sane.
That's the priority, it sounds like, right?
Right.
Yeah. That's hard because a lot of people, and myself included, it's easy to eat a certain way and exercise and, you know what I mean? Like do the physical things that are good for you, but the mind piece and the heart piece, how did you go about making those changes in your life?
Well, they had to happen
Yeah.
because cancer like came to my face and was like, change or die. And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I'd like to change.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's a lot of things that I feel like when people look at what I do, kind of like roll their eyes and are like, oh, well, I guess you're so lucky you got to do that. And I'm like, well, don't be too jealous or think I'm too lucky, because you could very easily get a big thing happen in your life, car accident or cancer or other disease. But when it becomes that important, it's all these things that aren't valued in our society. So prior to going to Germany, because they do art therapy there with painting, I had never painted. Like I did in school growing up. But if I'm not an artist, there's no point in painting because it's frivolous and a waste of time. And I did not realize how healing it was to sit before a blank canvas and just paint what is inside. And so now once or twice a month, I have some girlfriends over and we paint or do some sort of other art. So I do that. I do a lot of the adult coloring that is so like hip and trendy right now, but it works and it's easy to put in my purse. And if I'm going to listen to music at a coffee shop, I can just color, things like that. The meditating, and there's different forms of it, because you can also do like guided visualizations where you listen to headphones, or just listening to music. My husband and I got tickets to the symphony when we returned from Germany, because listening to live music and the frequencies and the vibrations in our body like are changing things. And then something else that I'm thinking about is how I asked everybody I knew to pray for me, just to pray for me in whatever way they do that, because there is evidence about how powerful prayer is on a being. And so that's what I asked for. So hundreds of people were praying for me. And I keep asking them to keep praying, like, even though I'm currently cancer free, that whenever I come to mind, just like send me a blessing or send me love in my direction, so that I can keep receiving that from other people and they can join me on this journey. And then I'm not alone, because I have such a great support system.
And I know you kind of touched on the difference between the culture in Berlin and Germany and in the US. What do a lot of people think when you tell them what you're doing after your diagnosis and how you've gone about becoming cancer free and everything? What is, yeah.
So I've never been to Berlin, P.S. My husband has.
Okay. Okay.
We're living there because that's the capital.
Gotcha.
The clinic where I went is about 5 hours south of Berlin.
Nice.
And that's more country in the middle of nowhere. So some people might be like, what are you talking about? Like, the cities in Europe are just as stressful and busy as the cities in America. And I always come back with like, right, yeah. But are the grocery stores open in Germany on Sunday? And they're like, no, of course not. And I'm like, right. And are they open 24 hours? And they're like, no, not really. I'm like, right. In the United States, 24/7, the majority of grocery stores. And that's impacting those employees and their families. I'm fine with the grocery store closing at 7 o'clock at night. And so it's just a different feeling on Sundays in Germany, you can't run errands.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the US, like, we're busy running around. Things like
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
yeah.
Because you feel the need here to do something every second of every day, because that's how business and everything operates, right?
Right. That big difference between doing and being, and how being is not valued,
Mm-hmm.
but being is what has been healing me.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I don't know what the question was.
What do people think? Or what does the typical American think of? Because I'm sure you've surrounded yourself with people who understand you and understand the circle theory and all of that. It's not the necessarily average American.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have received no negative feedback except from my doctors, and now they're fine. They don't give me any negative feedback. But when I talk with other women, there is a lot of bad negative judgment when they choose not to do chemo, especially if they have children. They get this huge guilt trip mother shame card of like, you're not thinking about your kids. And I had made my decision to decline chemo based on the research that my sister had done and all of the work I was doing with my intuition and tapping into my body and hearing what its wisdom was. But then when I returned 4 months later from Germany, I found studies that showed that declining chemo is a viable option for the type of breast cancer that I was given the diagnosis of, because when they do the statistics in the computer at the oncologist office, I was given an 18% benefit rate for chemo. And I was like, 18%? Like, I already have this percentage without chemo, and then doing it will get me to 18 points higher. I was like, that's not enough for me. My oncologist was like, 18% is huge. And I was like, cool. It's not huge enough for me, because I had been very clear that my morbidity, which is my quality of life, is much more important to me than my mortality, which is my length of life. So I was like, if I live 5 more years, but it's quality, great. If I live 30 more years, but it is like not quality, I'm in and out of the hospital, like, no thanks. And that came from watching my older sister over the course of a year and a half die in the hospital, and watch as different interventions prolonged her death and never enhanced her life. So I watched her suffer. So I was like, yeah, I don't want to suffer. So I want to have as many happy moments each day as possible. And if that ends up leading to 30, 40, 50 years, awesome. If it ends up leading to 3 or 5 years, awesome. Because otherwise you're just living in this like cloud of fear. I think I did not answer your question.
That's my original question. I've been mesmerized by your idea of, and it's true. And I mean, I've watched someone close to me recently suffer in terms of health, and it's so true, right? In terms of when you think of life and what you want to do, is that the length of life the importance, or the quality, like you said, right? And I know seeing that firsthand for you, probably with your sister, was really hard, but at the same time it's impacted your choices going through with your own health decisions. Yeah. Can I ask, were you always like, what were you like as a kid growing up?
Oh, I'm shy.
Yeah.
And I was very shy. I'm even shy now. I'm very good one-on-one.
Yeah.
But in a group, I tend to get a little quiet unless I know everybody in the group.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very shy, very smart, still very smart. So I think in first or second grade, I, in my mind, had figured out the cure for cancer.
Yeah. Okay. What was it? Do you remember?
In college, I wrote a poem about it. But my mom was teaching me about soap and how soap kills all germs, and how I was taught or educated about cancer as a child was like, it's a germ, it's like a bad thing in the body. So in my mind, I was like, so why are people getting IVs of this chemo? Why aren't they getting IVs of soap? And so I was like, I figured it out, but I cannot tell adults, because adults aren't going to listen to a kid. So I have to wait until I'm an adult, and then I'm going to tell people that you can cure cancer with an IV of soap. Miracle. So I was smart, I was shy, I was funny, but very quiet. And so I related a lot better with adults than with other children. And so sometimes that made it a little challenging. Of course, I still have friends, but but the Colleen now gets to wear whatever she wants.
Yeah.
Because as a child, I didn't. And I get to have my hair however I want. Because as a child, I didn't. So I get to express myself, which I really enjoy. And have found pleasure in that. Because I read somewhere, if we could dress our soul as opposed to our body, what would we wear? And of course, like, I don't know, I'm drawn to like real flowy stuff or bright colors or sparkly. Like if I had to like pick an outfit out for my soul. And then it was like, so why don't you wear that outfit? Because your body houses your soul. And so I've been having a lot of fun with that, different types of jewelry. As opposed to before, it was just like, oh, just be efficient, like wear the shirt. Doesn't matter.
And even as a kid, you think of playing dress up or something like that, right? And then you lose that as an adult. You think you have to look a certain way and everything, but why can't we still dress up as we want to, right? Even as
every day is dress up.
Every day, right? If it makes you happy. People think about wearing certain underwear or a bra to make them like a secret and make them happy, but I'm like, you could do that with your clothes any day if you wanted.
Exactly. I love that, Deanne.
Yeah. And you said you've kind of struggled with like different chronic illness and not feeling the best throughout your whole life, right? How do you feel like that's affected you? I mean, before even the diagnosis and everything, how did that impact?
Yeah, I work with a lot of images, and so the image I often had was like, okay, I'd be running, and then like I would trip and fall, and so like I got mono, and then like I recovered from that, and like I'm off and running, and like I would just keep having these things, and so in my early 30s with Q fever, I felt like that was like a huge one because it took me out for 2 years, and then like I got back up. I was all better from it. Like, okay, here we go. And like, I was feeling great, feeling awesome. Like I had no symptoms, felt the healthiest I'd been my whole life. And then the piece of paper says it's cancer. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And so that again felt like a huge like trip and fall. But I still haven't felt sick. The only thing I've had is recovery from surgery. I had a mastectomy and I chose not to have reconstruction. And I also got a port, and I still have a port that goes in because at the time of surgery, I was undecided about chemo, but I use that port a lot for my alternative IVs. So I think ports are great. And if anyone is doing chemo, they really should have a PICC line or a port. Don't let their doctors or insurance company talk them out of that, because you want your veins to be healthy. So the only time I haven't felt good is post-surgically, just recovering from that. But this last year, I have not gotten sick. Like not a cold, not a nothing. Like I feel great. And so it like can play with your mind, because then I'm like, okay, you feel great. Like what's going to be the next thing? Like, is there a next thing? Are you all done with this? Like this was the last one. You have received all of the lessons or medicine that you need, and so now you can go forward? Or is this like how life will play out this time around? Like there'll be things that you have to keep dealing with. And so I try not to get stuck in thought loops about illnesses or this diagnosis or things like that, but to stay with like, today you feel great. And if I don't feel like awesome, then I go take an Epsom salt bath or a nap, or have a really big green smoothie, like something that I just feel like my body will be like, ooh, thank you, I feel better.
Wow. Yeah, and I know exactly what you're thinking in terms of like that negative loop. Is so many women, I think, go through that, right? Is like you said, we're our own worst critic. We're so hard on ourselves. We don't love ourselves. And it just cycles, right? And how much it affects your everyday life is huge.
Yeah.
What's when on another side, and you don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, but you said, when did you marry your husband, Josh? What's that been like throughout this whole journey?
We met in 2005, and that's because when I left Pennsylvania, I said to all my friends and family, I am going to Colorado to find my sensitive mountain man. And I found him.
Whoa. How soon after you moved did you find him?
3 years. Or maybe he found me. I don't know.
Yeah.
So that was in 2005. And then in 2007, we got married. And since he's my sensitive mountain man, he isn't the stereotypical American dude.
Mm-hmm.
So like, he doesn't watch football or sports. He has a master's in counseling. So we have really great conversations. Like I always joke that having a live-in counselor after a cancer diagnosis is pretty awesome because like anytime, like if I wake up panicked or if I can't sleep at night or if someone has said something to me, like almost always is available to like help me process all of that. And so in the beginning of the diagnosis, it brought us really, really close, of course. And I think this is a typical pattern. And then after a few months, we had some challenges because he wanted our life to go back to how it was. And this is just my interpretation. If he listened to this, he might tweak it and say like, no, this is really what it was. From my understanding, I felt like he wanted our life to go back to the way it was. And I was like, my life can never go back to the way it was because it's change or die. And if I go back to being the same, then that means die. So I have to change.
Wow. Yeah.
And so a lot of the spiritual growth, he has just been able to like watch from the outside because I don't know that he can join me on that deep journey to my soul and things like that, but he wants to hear about it and we share about it. And we talk about how right now the season that I'm in is the cocoon of a caterpillar. So right now I'm like the goo and I'm being rewired. Like all of the parts of my being are being rewired. And at some point I'm going to emerge as this butterfly and I don't know when or how. But then I look at him and I'm like, still, I'm going to be a completely different creature of who you married. Like, do you want to like cash out? Like, he's like, no, I can handle it. Like, let's go. I'll change with you. And so, but it has not been easy. There's been, and we've had a couples counselor, I think for like 5 years. So we see him. But that we're both committed to being the best versions of ourselves and helping each other be the best versions of ourselves. And so it's been really good. So right now we're in a great place.
Yeah, no, and that's amazing that you found someone who's, I mean, understanding and willing to go through this growth process with you, because I can only imagine how much you've changed in the past year, regardless of since 2005 when you met him, right?
Oh, totally. And if your partner can't do that, like there's lots of other like best friends, sisters, mentors, life coaches. Like it doesn't have to always be your partner. Like your partner isn't everything all the time.
Yes. Yeah. And that's good to not put that pressure, I think, on a partner as well sometimes, right? Because they can't be all things to one person. So
right. Like I don't want them to go home and like hit their partner and be like, why do you watch football? Why can't we talk about our feelings?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, poor guy. Yeah.
Right. No. Because that's not what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah. There's more to it. If there was someone who was like Colleen of just before the diagnosis or just before this has all happened, what would you say to them?
First, I would cup their face in my hand because I feel really comfortable when people do that to me. And I would talk very slowly and very quietly and say, everything is going to be okay. And my husband and I, after I get big tests done or things like that, we always have a everything is going to be okay party. And whether the tests are positive or negative, everything's going to be okay. And to really like think and like let that in, because the first response is, but what if?
Yeah. What if, right?
Right. Totally. But it's going to be okay. And if they have that real big fear of the dying process or of death, to give them different resources to do that, because with Q fever, I lost my fear of dying and I lost my fear of death. So I was like, great, I'm good to go. Like, have at it. And then cancer comes and it's like, oh, wait.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't scared of dying or death. What I found from reading some books was that I was actually scared of life. And that is the next step. Like once you lose your fear of death, then your step is to lose your fear of living and of life. And so that's when I was like, okay, here we go. This is the next thing. And so that's what I would do. Be very quiet, very gentle. And if they can't hear that, then just validate and reflect and be like, this sucks. Yes, it's not fair. It sucks. End of story. Shouldn't have happened. Doesn't make any sense. It's bullshit.
Yeah. I'm sure all the things you probably wish someone was there to tell you as soon as you heard that news, right?
And I had them, like my friends.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like I'm asking a leading question, but do you feel like we're alone going through these struggles or cancer or anything like that?
We can be.
Yeah.
Totally.
Did you feel alone ever going through?
Yeah, like I remember that first month, I was like, I just want to talk to another woman under the age of 40 with this exact diagnosis. And I couldn't find her. And so I found lots of women over 40, over 50, because when a reproductive cancer under the age of 40 happens, it's pretty quick that they want to talk about future children. And if you haven't had children yet, do you want to have children? All of these things. So I was real angry about talking to like a woman in her 50s or 60s. I was like, you've had your life, you've had your kids, like, no. So I felt very, very alone. And I tried different support groups and I couldn't really work with them. Even the alternative cancer support groups for people who have chosen not to do the traditional treatments, there's still just a lot of fear. Like you introduce yourself by like the type of cancer you have. And I was like, oh, I don't want to keep looking into the past. So I discovered that my art nights, when I have my friends over, those turned into my support group, our support group, because we, while are doing art, are just talking about the deep things in our life. And by and large, we're talking about what we want for the future, what the things we're doing now are helping us to get to where we want to be. And so now I do not feel alone. I've met other women under the age of 40, which has helped a lot, and that we can just like talk about everything that means. And then just having all of my friends, like my friends, I don't know where I'd be without them. But yes, you can totally do this journey alone. You can shut your ears to the advice that people have, the love that they want to give. Some people I know people that go through their cancer journey and no one knows. No one. Like maybe a close friend who drives them home from chemo, but their work doesn't know, their family doesn't know. So yeah, you can go through it alone. I don't know if they feel lonely, if that's their choice, because different things work for everybody. But yes, I had felt alone and I do not feel alone now.
Good answering that question, that one. Yeah. Why do you want to share your story now? What compels you to be so open about it all?
Because I wanted this story last year. I wanted somebody to be out there. And my sister and I dug and dug and dug. We found a woman in Australia. We sent her Facebook messages. We didn't hear from her. We were like, oh no, is she dead? Because I'd like heard rumors and like whispers of like people who said like, oh, a cancer diagnosis was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I was like, how did you get there? I want to get there. I don't want it to be like the worst thing that ever happened to me and it was my enemy and like I finally conquered it. Like, no. Like, I want to walk this path in love. So how did you get there? And when I got back in October last year, after being in Germany, I saw like the first crack of light of maybe this isn't all horrible.
And what was that?
And that's when I started to like let myself love myself, because growing up I wasn't allowed to love myself. That was bad and sinful. And so I said to my husband, if it took a cancer diagnosis for me to finally like actually say that my heart is good and I love myself, like deep swallow, maybe, then it's not all horrible. And so I still am not at the point where I would say this is the best thing that ever happened to me.
I was going to ask that actually. Yeah. To see whether you're there or not yet. Yeah.
Some days
Yeah.
I feel like it's the best thing that ever happened to me. But I don't feel like I'm in the season yet. And I still think because it's early and like you want to have as much time as you can to like be here and experience things. And so like I don't feel like I'm ready, like if it were to end quite yet.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still that little like thing that I'm making peace with.
Mm-hmm. Would you go back and change anything that you've done?
From when I was
Wow.
born?
Yeah, I was like, there's too many things to talk about. In the last, I guess, 5 years, we'll say.
I don't think so, because sometimes I ask, like, could you have learned this information with the Q fever diagnosis?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
So is there anything I would have changed? I would have gone slower because I used to live really, really fast. And I was working really, really hard on slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
And I had made great strides, but it wasn't until the diagnosis that like I sat my butt down. So no, probably there isn't anything I would have changed. I probably, when that doctor said like, when I was like, hey, should we do a scan? And she was like, no, I probably would have said, let's do the scan.
Because yeah, that would have changed things probably for you.
And who knows, it still might have been negative the summer prior to it, because the type that the biopsy showed, it was just so fast growing. So that summer there might not have been any cancer there. And then 6 months later there was. I don't know. But that would have helped. I did call that doctor and I just said, P.S. for young women with dense breasts, let them get as many ultrasounds as they want. Don't say like, oh, you're young, it won't happen, because mammograms aren't effective with dense breasts. So like I said, the mammogram I had when the cancer tumor was in my breast was negative for cancer. And so
yeah, that's what you would do. Yeah. What's next for you?
Well, the move to Germany is a big one.
Actually.
We take off from JFK in New York City on New Year's Eve, and we land on New Year's Day because it's the least expensive. But we also like the symbolism behind it of starting a new
year,
chapter of our life in the new year, and things like that. So that's next on the big next thing on the horizon.
Mm-hmm. That's I'd say that's just a little thing that's going on in your life. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So now I always ask a series of questions to finish off with, and I feel like I could talk to you forever about all the things you've been through and all your experiences to share. But in terms of wrapping up, one question I want to ask is, what's your definition of perfectly imperfect? Yeah.
I don't know. Just what we are, like, boom. Like, this is perfect, and it's perfect because it's not perfect. Ideal. I don't know.
Yeah. Simple. It's effective. What's your definition of powerfully passionate?
Powerfully passionate. So I have a lot of passion, and I've struggled a lot with people referring to that as being bitchy. And so turning that word into strong. And so I find my passion to be very, very strong. And so that's what it means to me, to take off all that negative connotation that we put on females when they're strong, when they're powerful, and to own it and say like, no, this is great.
How do you go, and this is not one of the questions, but how do you go about that? Like, how do you be so strong and not let other people's opinions of you affect you? Or how do you teach other women to be as strong, kind of as passionate about things as you are?
I think the tool that helped me the most was something that my life coach had me read. Mm-hmm. And it's a book called The Untethered Soul. And he talks about taking the seat of consciousness. And so for me, like, I take my consciousness out of my head and I like put it right here. Mm-hmm. And I start watching things. And so when I do that, I can start seeing that person who's saying negative, horrible things about me as a wounded person, and just to have more compassion and not to always react to things and instead just respond. So what I hear you saying is that you don't like my tone of voice when I say it this way. I'm like, so if I change my tone of voice, does that make it better? Yeah. And then they'll be like, yes. I'm like, great. I have a weird tone of voice when I'm with this person. I can do that. Yeah. Fine with me. Yeah. But just to like take that seat and watch like me interact with that person and just take a step away from it so it's not so heated inside. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Neat. 2 more questions. What's the best way for women to get in touch with you, or if they hear your story and want to reach out to you, how do they do that?
Right. So my website right now is ColleenFlowers.com, but I'm changing it to HolisticCancerLiving.com because I just realized that's what I'm going to call myself. Mm-hmm. And I'm also, as I said, a holistic reproductive health practitioner. So that website is flowersfertility.com. And that's for like natural birth control, natural conception, anything holistic, natural with fertility, or just understanding things, because doctors don't always explain stuff. And then I'm on Facebook, and in August, I was forced into joining Instagram by one of my besties. Excellent. And Justina Thompson of Nourish Fertility. And I love it. I love Instagram. Oh my gosh, it's so fun.
Yeah, it is.
And I've also started a private group on Facebook for talking about stuff like this from the like more soul spirit aspect of disease or illness or things like that.
Awesome. And we'll link that all up for listeners to see it written, and so they can easily access you that way.
Great.
Before I ask my final question, I want to take a second and thank you, Colleen, for sharing your story and being so strong with everything you've been through. And I mean, I can only imagine your life and everything you've been through, and I can't possibly put myself where you have been, but the fact that you have been so strong and have shared your story in such a way to help women and to be vulnerable and okay with being wrong in a certain way, and opening yourself up to the possibility that, okay, maybe I'm not doing things exactly perfect, and learning to love yourself, which is, I think, the hardest thing women can do sometimes. And taking it all in and just giving it all back in another way, and learning so much as you go through. And I want to thank you for sharing your story and being who you are in this world. So
thanks.
Yeah. So my last question, how I finish off with, is what's one piece of advice or a takeaway that you would want Earth Girls or anyone struggling through something or feeling alone and wanting to do more but not knowing how to take away from your story and what you've been through?
That you can't mess up. Like whatever you're doing now is what you're supposed to be doing. And if you want to make changes, to make those changes as slow as possible. Because if you throw out everything in your kitchen, everything in your bathroom, and you start, are you going to still be doing it in a month? So just to go, as I said before, as slow as possible, and to have the willingness to, because when bad things happen in our society, everyone wants to like crowd around you, be like, this sucks, this is horrible, on and on and on. And it reminds me of the Taoist story of the farmer. I don't know if you've heard of this, but the farmer in his field, all of a sudden he finds a whole bunch of wild horses, and his neighbors come and say, this is great, this is awesome. And he's like, we'll see. And then the next day his son is trying to tame the wild horses and breaks his leg. And that night his neighbors come and say like, oh, this is horrible. And he says, we'll see. And then the next day the army comes looking for young men to join the army, and his son cannot join because he has a broken leg. And that night his neighbors come and say, oh, this is great. And again he says, we will see. So because people came around me and said, like, this is the worst thing ever. This is the worst thing ever, cancer diagnosis. And I just kept saying, like, we'll see. So they come at us with so much fear, so much panic. And to try to take that deep breath and say, like, where's the peace in all this panic? And just we'll see. Maybe it is bad, and we'll find out later. But maybe it's really good, and we could take steps to get there.
I love that story. Actually, I've never heard that one.
It's so good. I love it.
Yeah, it is a really good one because it's true. You never know, and you could take it one way or another way, but until you go through it and you take it a year from now and next day or whatever it is, you don't know, right?
Exactly.
And we'll see if one day your cancer diagnosis is the best thing that's ever happened to you or not.
We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah. Cool. Well, I want to
be toward the good of it.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you once again, Colleen, for talking and sharing your stories with us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Deanne, thank you for doing this for all of us ladies.
No, I'm happy to. It's you guys that are the amazing ones. I'm just trying to facilitate it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.